Good morning. We're going to talk about the homework, which was of talking about the Louisiana Purchase. You had to read about that. And then we're going to look at roads and what happened with roads. So, one, what in the world happened? Well, first and foremost, Thomas Jefferson was given a message. We wanted to go and have access to New Orleans ports, and that was controlled by France. And so France had gotten control of it, and they were going to charge Americans to use it. And so we had sent negotiations, or we'd sent negotiators over to France and to try and negotiate getting New Orleans. Napoleon just flummoxed him when he suggested, well, I don't want to sell just the rights to New Orleans. I want to sell rights to everything in what is now called the Louisiana Purchase. All the lands from the Mississippi River to the Rocky Mountains. And basically going with everything in the waterway. Any water, if it was land that had water that flowed in the Mississippi River, it would then go to, whoever controlled it here. And so he wanted money because he was going to take over more of Europe and he needed more money. There had been a rebellion in Haiti and France had lost. And so Napoleon is thinking that I don't want to take and try to take over the New World right now. That hasn't been working. But taking over Spain has worked, which is why I have control of this land. And so that's what's going on. So the president wants to do this. It's only $15 million. But there's nothing in the Constitution that says that the president can expand or that America can expand. There's nothing in there. And so he's going, oh, what can I do? What can I do? And he finally figured out that, wait a minute. The Constitution lets the president negotiate treaties. So he negotiated a treaty, and then it was something in the Constitution, the Congress can approve a treaty. And so that's what happened. The Senate approved the treaty, and it's okayed by Congress, and everything's fine. But what you have to understand is that what Spain had controlled was land that it had explored. It claimed for itself. That land was then claimed by France when France took over Spain. So now France owns this land, but they don't really own it. They have claimed it. They say it is mine, and they're now going to sell it to the United States, but they don't really own it because they haven't given any money to the people that are actually living on the land. So what does America really buy with the Louisiana Purchase? We purchase the right to try to take the land from the people that are already living on it. And that's important. Okay, so we can always talk about how the United States doubled in size with the Louisiana Purchase. Yeah, we claimed more land, but then we still had to take it from the people. It would be like somebody going and selling somebody my house, and then they come come in the house and say, well, this is mine, I bought it. And I'd say, what do you mean? I live here. And that's what was happening. So there's our map that you had to do. I'm going to go to an answer key so that you can see it. So what did you have to do? You had to know, well, we did add the Ohio River here. So the Ohio River goes down. It's the border of Ohio. You know the Mississippi River sort of starts with a question mark in Minnesota. Those of you that have walked across the beginning of the Mississippi, there you go, up in Lake Itasca, goes all the way down. There's the Mississippi. This is used a lot. How far did the United States get? Okay, the first 13 colonies, the treaty with Britain said that America could have all the land to the Mississippi River. Again, if we could take it. Then this area here that is the Louisiana Purchase went from the Mississippi River over to the Rocky Mountains, and it was all the land that had water that flowed into the Mississippi River. That's why it's not getting this area down here, because that doesn't go there. It goes into the Gulf of Mexico. Okay, so you've got that land. The Rocky Mountains were the big barrier. You finally got here, and you went, oh, now I got to cross these mountains. When you cross the mountains, you could eventually, there's a Snake River, and then you ended up in the Columbia River, and the Columbia River took Lewis and Clark and their men and Sacagawea down to the Pacific Ocean. This land up here was the Oregon Territory, and it went all the way up into Canada. We're going to talk about that later. Then we've got all this land that's claimed by Spain, because they still haven't given that up yet. You've got land here that's claimed by Spain. So you have the Louisiana Territory, you have Spanish territory, you have the Oregon Territory. So that's what you had to do, and you had to have those rivers. The Missouri River is what Lewis and Clark went up, and again, they're going upstream, and the water's coming down, so it was an extreme trip. Revolutions in transportation. Now, understand, as we started out, that the roads were horrible. So, under ideal conditions, a coach driven by a fresh team of horses could cut dirt at the breakneck pace of 9 miles per hour. Yet driving conditions throughout much of the century were rarely ideal. Rutted slurries of mud and horse dung were more the standard on secondary and rural roads. In spring, vehicles got stuck up in those quagmires so often that the expression "up to the hub" became a national colloquialism or saying to illustrate any predicament. And so they were horrible. And so you want to write down in your chart, what was wrong with the roads. They were muddy, they were dirty, they were bumpy. Imperfect roads contributed to mishaps and unpleasantries of all kinds. Potholes broke wheels and axles, ditching some vehicles. Washboarded surfaces jounced passengers out of their seats, and sometimes, if they were riding on the roof, onto the road. An English traveler in America in the 1820s wrote of being tossed about like a few potatoes in a wheelbarrow. Our knees, elbows, and heads required too much care for their protection to allow us leisure to look out of the window. So it was like, protect yourself. Bad roads and driver impatience frequently combined to turn a coach over. During any long stage trip, in fact, passengers expected and were mentally prepared for at least one turnover. One New Yorker in 1839 reported that his stage turned over 9 times. 9 times on a trip to Cincinnati and back. Such a high rate of accidents was more often attributed to alcohol than bad roads alone, and rightly so. So drinking and driving never mixes, even if you're driving horses. Drivers throughout the period were notorious for their drunkenness, and so they weren't getting paid very well, and they took their pay in drink, and that was not a good thing. So you've got a chart. I want you to write down what some of the problems were. So you've got bad roads. So what are they going to do to fix them? Now, if you've ever worn corduroy pants or a corduroy jacket, you know that corduroy is really bumpy. Okay? So what they did is they laid logs down to keep from being stuck in the mud. And so it's like you're making almost a bridge, but it's just you lay these down, you put one over the top to hold them in place, and you'd go over them, but it's bumpy. As they said, it would knock the living liver right out of you. Well, these were being done by individual people. And so sometimes they would have what's called a turnpike. And that meant this pike, this piece of wood, was down. And when you paid your money, they would turn the pike and let you through. And so that's how it was done. Sometimes they paved with stone. They paved it with whatever they had handy. And so if it's an area where there's lots of stone, you're going to use stone. If it's an area with lots of wood, you're going to use wood. And so that's what they did. You've seen turnpikes today if you've ever been in a parking ramp. You pay the money and the turnpike goes up. We sometimes call it a turnstile today. Okay, so stop and think, what were some of the programs with really roads and how did they improve? And we're going to stop right there. Thank you.